This week on the Powell Not Found podcast, we're talking about the Yankees clinching a AL East division, possibly, and viewing of Mr. Lincoln at Ford's Theater coming up next on the show. Let's go. Hey, let's go.
I'm gonna tell you a story about a girl who loves gin. A national pandemic seized her birthday celebration. Although she knew it was coming, we tried not to tell her. She brewed some Irish breakfast till she knew her birthday was getting corona.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the show. I am your host, Mark Powell of the Powell Not Found podcast for the week of Sunday, September 22nd, and we're doing a pretty late night recording. Things kind of took a little bit more priority than recording the show, so this show will be a little bit shorter in length, but it's a little bit more ominous in recording since it's at night, Sunday night, going into the week. The Yankees just finished off a sweep of the Oakland Athletics and have opened up a 6-game lead in the AL East over the Baltimore Orioles. You got to think that a month ago, 2 months ago, there was probably more of an idea that going into this Baltimore series at the end, it was going to be a heavyweight title, heavyweight fight, a title bout, if you will, between two AL East Titans. And the Orioles have completely fell off the table, at least when it comes to the division. Now, they're going to make the playoffs. They're going to be a wild card team. They are still going to be formidable down the stretch. There's really no taking your foot off the gas. If you're the Yankees, you still need to win one more. Your magic number is at number 1. But it is surprising that going into this Baltimore series, I had a couple weeks ago, or 4 weeks ago, I was envisioning this is going to be it. It's going to come down to this, but with a 6-game lead, the Yankees can kind of cruise, and that's exactly what I'm worried about. I feel like when the Yankees take their foot off the gas, they take their foot off the gas, and it takes a while to restart that engine. But here we are, 6-game lead. You couldn't ask for something better. They need one win or one loss, really, from the Orioles in their last series, or just to finish them off here at Yankee Stadium. So if you're a Yankees fan, you couldn't ask for a better recipe at this point. Some other game notes: Giancarlo Stanton is starting to kind of heat up, which is always good to see at the end of the year. Going into the playoffs, Aaron Judge hitting his 55th home run of the year. Jason Dominguez hitting his 2nd home run of the year, so he's kind of heating up a little bit, showing signs of what he was. And the Yankees kind of finish off their last game at the Oakland Coliseum. Next year, the A's, as per Major League Baseball's mandate that no one assign a city to them, they are known as just the A's. Next year, we'll be playing in Sacramento. So don't you dare call them the Sacramento A's. Don't you dare. They're the Athletics. They're the A's. They are the horse with no name next year as they prepare for a 3-year stint. And it's a little bit sad. The Oakland A's are going to close that stadium. I never got to see that stadium. It was one of those places where if I was in the neighborhood and I could take in a game, I definitely would have gone. But the way that people characterized that stadium didn't seem all that great. You know, talking today, they were saying that it was the last stadium that really didn't have bullpens, right? They were out in the field. It was very, very large. The dugouts didn't have railings because when a foul ball is coming at you, it has time. It has time to kind of slow down before it actually hits you, so there was no need for a railing. Obviously, the site of where Moneyball was created, right? Oakland. Brad Pitt stood on that field and commiserated with all of Oakland's fans that they were not going to win anything, despite their fiscal responsibility. It was there that the legend of Jermaine Dye, as a staunch player, unwilling to change, was sown by Hollywood. but it's all going to come to an end, and probably for the better. I don't think that stadium should probably house Major League Baseball anymore. And even though at the detriment of the Oakland losing their team, I think the best case scenario would have been for Oakland to subsidize a new stadium so that their fans could go to a park that's new. Because no matter what, even if you saved the stadium, even if you kept playing in that ballpark, you're doing a disservice to the people who are really loyal there because those ballparks are old, right? And I think my opinion about this changed after they knocked down Yankee Stadium, right? In 2008, when Yankee Stadium was at its when it was finished and it was over, there is that nostalgia of, oh no, we're no longer playing in the park that Babe Ruth played in. You know, the history is gone. Is the history going to transfer over to the new park? And it did immediately. We won a championship, and then we haven't won one since. So we'll see. We'll see this year. But the experience was so much better as a fan than going to the old park. The ability for it to expand was so much more. If you go into Yankee Stadium right now, the food options are different. There's different places you can go get concessions, souvenirs, and things to amplify your experience. You can go down and see a new kind of like more streamlined Monument Park. You know, there are things in that ballpark that kind of help aid the fan experience a little bit more than the old one did. There are more luxury boxes, which is great for making money for the team. This is probably something that Oakland's probably going to see in Vegas once they actually get there, if they get there. But, you know, there's only so much you can do with an old ballpark. So there's a part of me that's like, yeah, it stinks that it's leaving. It stinks that I never get to see it. There are certainly ballparks that I wish I had seen before they had gone, but getting them out of that ballpark, regardless of whether Sacramento is the right move, it's the right move to move on from that particular facility, right? Like when the Nats came down and the Expos came down to D.C. and became the Nationals, they played at RFK for 3 years, and building RFK and making it suitable for a ball game was a nightmare. They needed that new stadium, right? So it's a familiar and interesting playbook that Major League Baseball is using to get the Oakland and Vegas. They're almost using Sacramento as a pit stop, as they used RFK when the Nationals came in 2005. They played there for 3 years, and they moved into a new ballpark. And now that area, Navy Yard in Washington, is very, very decked out with different things and different restaurants that just weren't there. I think the only thing that was there was the bullpen, and now it's Silver Diners there. You know, you got some taco places there. It's a great place to go see a ball game. It's also a great place to go get dinner. Right? They have all these restaurants on the water and stuff like that. It's really grown into itself. So it's sad that Oakland is gone. It's sad that we're not going to see a baseball game there anymore, but we have to move on. I think it will be it will feel like next year when we see ball games in Sacramento, it's going to feel like when, the Jays in Dunedin. It's going to feel like when the Yankees just played in Williamsport. It's going to feel smaller, interesting, and it's going to harken back to the COVID years, right, where they couldn't get to Canada. It's going to feel different, and probably feel different for probably about 10 innings. And then we're going to forget about the Major League Ballpark in Oakland, and we're going to move on. So with that, it's great that history was made there. Ricky Henderson, Billy Beane, all the legends of the A's. But it's nice that they're finally turning the page for a new stadium. And I have the hottest of takes when it comes to new stadiums in this regard. I'm not even sure if I should say it in this podcast because it feels like it's a derisive thing. But it's funny. I was talking today about how funny it is that the old ballparks we get nostalgic about these things and how it can change really, really quickly. When I was growing up in New England, a Yankees fan amongst Boston territory, how dare I? In the 90s, they were actively discussing taking out and getting rid of Fenway Park because of the age of it. Before they built the monster seats and all that stuff, they had mock-ups, models of them building a replica Fenway outside of where the Green Monster is in Lansdowne Street. So they were going to build it in the same area in Fenway, but they were going to kind of start replacing the facility. And I think those plans fell through. They either didn't get funding or didn't get approval from the city. Building a ballpark, it takes money, right? It takes both private and public money to build a ballpark. One of the great things that I learned on there's a beautiful series on Architectural Digest about the history of ballparks, but public money has been building ballparks for a long time. Cleveland Municipal Stadium, right? Keyword municipal. So anyway, the take is that after all that stuff fell through, I believe that it was that over time the Fenway got landmarked, and now it's basically an untouchable piece of land. I mean, it would take a mountain of approvals in order to actually change the structure or start to work on a new Fenway Park. So after 107, 108 odd years, whatever it's been, since the opening of Fenway Park, it's going to be a long time before maybe potentially there's even a thought to a new ballpark. And what does that do to the people who are inside the ballpark and outside the ballpark? There are still seats in Fenway Park that are behind poles. You can't tell me that the fan experience at Fenway is better than some of these new ballparks. Yes, there's nostalgia. Yes, there's the rustic feel of being in Fenway Park. I'll give you that. But in terms of how much it can grow, I feel like they're at the ceiling. And they've done a great job at Fenway Park. There's a garden on the ceiling. There's monster seats and stuff that they added. There's a whole new deck. I mean, they've done everything they can do to build out of that little block of city grid that they had. But at some point, it feels like there has to be a push for something new. That newness might attract more people to the stadium, too. Not that Boston really needs it, but places like Miami, like they built a new stadium. At some point, more people probably flocked to it just to see what it was like to get out of Pro Player Stadium or wherever they played before just to see that new ballpark. So I'm excited for Oakland for that particular case because they're getting out of the old. They're doing what Boston has failed to do, is build something new and adequate for their fan base. Oakland's doing it. Oh, and by the direction of Major League Baseball. So give them credit. At least they're going someplace new, someplace where baseball could thrive, and they're going to fix that franchise. And maybe, in turn, once you fix the environment that you're in, once you fix the city that they're playing in, maybe that attracts more players to come sign there. There's going to be a contingent of players who are going to say, hey, I don't care if they're losing every single year. If we're playing in Vegas, that's going to be great. Kind of hand in hand works a lot with how much partnership now Major League Baseball has kind of developed with gambling and DraftKings and all that kind of stuff. So, this mic I think is at the end of its life cycle. But so the Yankees are one game away. Kind of went on a tangent there. It's a late night broadcast. So the Yankees are one game away. I hope that they start. There's going to be a couple things that happen here. If the Yankees clinch at home in the next couple games, as Yankee fans, there's going to be a couple things that happen. I think you're not going to see everyday players. I think you're going to see Judge get rest. I think you're going to see Giancarlo get rest. I think you're going to see some backup players like Verdugo, who got sat for Dominguez. I think you're going to see them start getting reps. John Birdie, I think you're going to see a start from third base. You're going to see Anthony Rizzo be the manager. It's going to be fun times, right, as we walk into this bye. The concerning thing is the bye, right? Everybody's been saying it on the sports channels, right? The bye team, the teams that get the bye, the first two teams, the best records of the division winners, they have never fared well. Last year, none of them advanced. That rest hurt them. So the Yankees are going to have to. They're in a position now where their success has put them in a position where they're going to get rest. I think the Yankees are a better team with rest. I think that, if they're getting banged up, they tend to kind of, use that as an excuse. So they're going to be fresh. But they're going to have to be ready to meet that moment of a team that just advanced from the wild card team, a team that's been spraying champagne. They're coming in with momentum. And as much as I love that they're being successful at the end of the season, I want them to keep riding this wave into the division series, because that 3-4 day gap, that is long enough. It's been proven at this point that it's long enough to kind of kill momentum. And that's the scariest thing I see winning the division here. So we'll see how the Yankees do. Be interesting to see how it kind of matches up, how everything kind of falls into place. So the Yankees are so close. Who knew at the middle of the season, when we were talking about all the Yankees struggles, all the Yankees injuries, when Giancarlo Stanton was out, when Aaron Judge and Juan Soto weren't hitting, when the whole team wasn't hitting, I didn't think I'd be sitting here at the end of the season with a 6-game pad going, we're about to clinch. That was not the thought process that was going on in my mind. Now, it's interesting to say that their magic number is at 1 because the Yankees have a losing record against the Orioles. Even if they swept, I think they'd come out even, or they'd be 1 game below 500. So if they lose the next 6 games and the Orioles tie the divisions, the Orioles will take the division because of their head-to-head. So it's good to know. That's why there's 6 to play with a 6-game lead that they haven't clinched. That's the reason why. Because remember, no tiebreakers. That's the whole point. It all goes down to division or record against opponent. So with that, I'm going to take a little bit of a quick break here. We'll be right back with a review of a show called Mr. Lincoln at Ford's Theater. So if you never thought that this podcast could vary enough, we're going from Yankees baseball, Oakland Coliseum, to a review about the 16th president of the United States. So listen, I got to keep the audience on its toes. So with that, we'll be right back, and yeah, I'll be back on the flip side. See you later. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Powell Not Found podcast, available on Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel, help the channel grow. And this time we're talking about a show I got the opportunity to see. I got free tickets. They weren't provided or anything like that. There's no sponsorship here. But it's just free tickets, free via Today Tix. They had a preview of a show called Mr. Lincoln at Ford's Theater. And I had always kind of wanted to go to Ford's Theater to see not only the history involved at that place. I've seen it as a kid. As I've grown older and started to get more interested in that stuff than I was as an 8-year-old, I always wanted to kind of see a show there. I'd been to the Peterson house across the street, the house where Lincoln died, and I actually saw it at such a young age. They still had the bloody pillow there. They took that away. And then recently kind of went over there to go visit after a show that we reviewed on the podcast called Manhunt came out. All that stuff came kind of flooding back. So it was something certainly that was on my bucket list to go do. And yesterday, or 2 days ago on Friday, I got a opportunity to see the first public preview of Mr. Lincoln, which is a new show at Ford's Theater, and it was the first public viewing of it. And man, it was interesting. There was a couple things that ended up really sticking out when it came to this performance. This run is on September 20th to October 13th for this show. So they have quite a few previews before they give it a go. But it was interesting to kind of see. So this is not like an official review or anything like that. This is more of kind of like what my initial kind of thoughts are about seeing the show and experiencing it, right? So this show stars Scott Bakula, who's playing Lincoln. This is the program via the website of Ford's Theater. Scott Bakula plays Lincoln. It's a one-man show. There's nothing but Scott Bakula on the actual show. Very interesting. Goes through kind of the beats of what you would kind of expect in a Lincoln one-man show. I think these things are kind of tough to do because everyone has experienced at this point in their life a reenactment of Lincoln. I think it's I'm not incorrect when I'm saying that I believe that Lincoln is like the second most written about person after Jesus, right? So people have been Lincolned, especially in this country. They've been exposed to Lincoln at some point or another, right? It's George Washington, especially when you're younger, as the first president, and then boom, there's 15 other presidents that are kind of skipped over in history class until you get to Lincoln. So if you've gone to any kind of Lincoln historical site, if you've gone to Gettysburg, you've been hit with Lincoln because he was, obviously the president during Gettysburg. But if you've been to Springfield, Illinois, where he resided for a lot of his young life, there's a lot of Lincoln exhibits that you can kind of go to the point of being Lincolned out. So, which is a personal thing that's happened to me when I was younger. There was not much more Lincoln I could take at that point going up to Springfield, Illinois. But if you go to Ford's Theater, you're definitely going to see it as it's the place where he died, right? And Ford's Theater, if you don't know, in the 60s, they kind of rebuilt the theater to what it looks like. They have a great museum downstairs that I got access to go into before the show. And there you can see, the Derringer of John Wilkes Booth. You can see different artifacts and stuff like that from the time. It's a really good museum. Not enough time to go see it, explore it fully. So definitely recommend, if you don't see the show, at least go to the museum at Ford's Theater, because it's definitely one of the spots you want to hit if you're going to do any kind of Civil War trail. It's the end of the Civil War, but it's definitely a place that you got to hit. As for the show, walking into Ford's Theater, I could not believe how small that theater was. And I think having had the opportunity and the kind of the blessing to go to a lot of different shows, working in the ticketing industry in New York for quite some time, I've seen a lot of different configurations of theaters, right? I not only theaters that I've been on stage for, but theaters that I just got to go see a show, right? And I think I was taken aback just about how small it was, because all of a sudden, all the things that I had read about that night when Lincoln was shot kind of seemed to make more sense, right? There's a lot of those passages in Manhunt talk about how the people who were there during the actual assassination were able to kind of just see what was in the box. When you get into the theater, you start realizing, because the proximity of the space is so small, right? That you start kind of realizing why everyone was able to kind of see what they were going to kind of do, why everyone was so mobile, why everyone can get where they were going. The space itself is not that big. But when you walk into the set, you're kind of presented with a kind of cutout picture of Lincoln. The set is beautiful. They've done a really good job in that regard. But immediately, I think playing Lincoln, if you're Scott Bakula, you're set up against an expectation that everyone has different in their head. It's probably one of the more challenging roles to play, because everyone has seen a cartoon Lincoln. Everyone's seen a caricature of Lincoln. Everyone's seen a really good depiction of Lincoln. Everyone's seen a really bad depiction of Lincoln. Everyone's seen Daniel Day-Lewis try to do it. Everyone's seen the guy on Manhunt just do it on Apple TV. There's been countless depictions of Lincoln, whether it be in real or fake form. So already you're up against everyone's expectations about what you're going to play. And in a way, you really can't win, right, if you're the actor. At some point, someone's going to say, that wasn't, that's not Lincoln. That's not historically accurate and whatever. And they do cover that in the program. They say, hey, some things have been kind of fudged, timeline's been fudged, so historians don't come after us, which was kind of cute to read. That being said, I think he does a really good job. He makes Lincoln seem like a real human being, which I think is always the challenge with Lincoln. Lincoln has been depicted so much in popular culture that I feel, and this is just a personal feeling, that like he has become almost like a tall tale character, right? Always telling stories, always having a quip about something. The human side of Lincoln, I think, gets kind of glossed over a lot because of all the success that he saw in his career. I think a lot of people like to just kind of play the same old beats and stuff like that without actually going into the human side of his character a little bit. I think this play does a good job. That being said, some of the criticism I have for this play, length. It's a preview, right? So there's no. I think a lot of people don't realize, like, when it goes into preview period, it can change, right? If you ever see a Broadway play during preview period, a director can stop it if they don't like what they're seeing, right? Because the historically, what directors do usually is that they're there for previews. It's the first dress rehearsals, right, that they have in front of an audience, right? They have dress rehearsals, then they have an audience come in, and they can basically tweak it and kind of read the audience's reaction. So my reaction of it being like, whew, you got to cut this down. Because at some point I was like, great, Lincoln, you're a great guy, but I've got things to do at home, They can start reading that audience reaction a little bit and still have the adjustment to make the adjustments before they can change something so that when opening happens and proper reviews come out for the show, they will have time to kind of recover. But that being said, it's a good one-man show. It does remind me a little bit of every single time if you're going to go to Gettysburg or go to Springfield, there's probably a quick chance you're going to find a Lincoln impersonator, right? And everyone's seen one walking down with a top hat, right? And everyone's seen a good one and everyone's seen a bad one, right? Everyone's seen the really, really good Lincoln impersonator where you're like, wow, like this is incredible. It feels like I'm looking at Lincoln. And everyone's seen the bad impersonator that looks like he just bought his beard and top hat at Party City and called it a day. With this is a very high production. Scott Bakula does a really good job of making you feel that he is him. And seeing it in Ford's Theater gives it a little bit more gravitas than it potentially would have been had it been in any other normal theater. And I think that's what kind of makes it feel a little bit more special than seeing it at the St. James in New York or the Imperial or something like that. Also, the intimacy of the space kind of lends to it because you're so close to him. You feel like you're talking to him. So that kind of connection is great. There are moments, I'm not going to lie, there are moments that kind of, that I would change. I think sometimes he has a little idiom that kind of he goes back to all the time in order to kind of launch him into a story. I feel like that kind of falls a little bit more into that tall tale character that I was talking about earlier. But again, good show. It is the most Ford's Theater show to see in Ford's Theater outside of the Christmas stuff that they do every single year, right? It's only fitting to see a Lincoln show in Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. It feels like the most D.C. show you could see, if that makes any sense. So if you get the opportunity, again, I got my free tickets on Today Tix. They're probably still doing lottery things, maybe, potentially. I can't say, so go check that app to see if they're still doing the free previews for it. Go check it out. If not, go spend some money because it's an interesting show and it, it deserves attention. It's a very well acted show. There are certain things about the sound design I would change, but again, it's previews, right? Go see the show at Ford's Theater. It's, if anything, it's really nice that they kind of let you go into the museum and stuff, and you feel like you're already immersed in the show before the show even begins. So I had a really good time at Ford's Theater. It was really nice to see a show there, and what a fitting one to see. But with that, I'm going to call it a little bit of a show this week. Next week is going to be really interesting. I'm probably going to come on a little bit earlier on Thursday and release a show. The Yankees will be finishing up their run, playing Baltimore and Pittsburgh, and we'll talk a little bit about the playoff picture coming up, because as these last 7 games of the season, the last week, we'll start to see and we'll start to know who might be the potential matchup for the Yankees, whether they are the 1 seed or the 2 seed, or if Cleveland leapfrogs them in this last week. So still, we have some things to look out for. We this may be a New York Astros situation again. If so, God help us all. But with that, that's the Powell Not Found podcast. Again, thank you guys for listening to the show. Sorry about the late broadcast, but we'll be back next week talking about playoff baseball, talking about there's a really, actually before I go, there's a really interesting article. I suggest everyone check it out, about my alma mater on The Athletic, talking about the growth of the JMU sports program, and how yesterday they just beat North Carolina, the Tar Heels, 70-50, and how they're making the argument that it doesn't matter. And so next week we might touch a little bit on that, because I want to kind of go in depth about it, because it's my old college, right? So it'll be really interesting to see what they're saying about it. Maybe some thoughts about that next week. But for now, thank you for subscribing to the podcast. Remember, every single subscriber counts. Go ahead and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts, and we will see you next week earlier than normal. We're going to prioritize this podcast next time, and we'll see you next week. See you guys.
I'm gonna tell you a story about a girl who loves gin. A national pandemic seized her birthday celebration. Although she knew it was coming,